Good morning, Matt Waldman. How are you this fine day? Nothing's going on out there. We're in the dead period of the season, thankfully. How are you, Matt?
I don't know a damn thing about Scotfish scoring. So
That is true. That is
that's
true.
what I told somebody who saw you this weekend at a
I
Scotfish
did
Bowl
at the
draft.
live. Just did my live draft yesterday here in Dallas. It was fantastic. Jake, hi. Nice to run into you and other listeners to this very podcast. Great hearing your feedback. Always appreciate it. Also, and by the way, I am Bob Harris from Football Guys. You can find me on the Twitter at Football Diehard. Matt Waldman, of course, also seen at Football Guys and the author of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, widely viewed as the best product of its type on the market today. You can find it at mattwaldman.com. Also, ongoing rankings available to you for purchase as well. I highly recommend you get those. I'm going to get them. I keep forgetting every time I say it, but I will have mine soon. And
You won't let me
too.
give them to him.
No, I want to buy them. I like to buy. I want to have an unbiased accounting. I don't want the people thinking I'm shilling for you when I'm not an actual customer, because I am an actual customer. I've bought every rookie scouting portfolio since they first came out, all the rankings, all the associated goodness, and I highly recommend you do that too, people. And so yesterday at the Scott Fish Bowl, it's like a super tight end heavy scoring. So I was investing heavily in tight ends. One of the tight ends I invested in was Pat Friermuth as my third tight end on my roster. I can probably save the day, but I was done no favors this morning as we record this Monday morning. There was a big trade. The Miami Dolphins sent Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey. First, it was a Jalen Ramsey traded to the Steelers. Then it was Jalen Ramsey and maybe Minkah Fitzpatrick coming back. And then the final piece was announced. Jonnu Smith reunited with Arthur, his old buddy from Atlanta. And so we had a question first today about whether we were feeling a fucking Robert Woods overtaking Calvin Austin for the number 2 role in Pittsburgh. Well, fuck all that. How do we feel about Jonnu Smith in this offense on the Pittsburgh side of this deal?
Well, I think if you're going to take a look at it as a conventional thing and say Arthur Smith's scheme is going to be pretty much the framework for what they do, and the framework for what they want to do is what Atlanta was doing in 2022 and 2023. Well, in 2023, they had Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts, and they combined for 158 targets, 103 catches, and about 1,240, almost 1,250 yards and 6 touchdowns. It was split pretty much down the middle in terms of receptions. The Smith was more of the underneath guy than Pitts was, and then the touchdowns were split over the middle. So it was like, if you look at it from that perspective, you could see how Jonnu Smith might get like somewhere between 70 to 80 targets, and Pat Friermuth gets 60 to 70 targets, and they're both in the range of somewhere between 600 and 700 yards, and they each get 3 to 4 scores. Now, we got to remember, too, that Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke were the quarterbacks here. They weren't Aaron Rodgers. And as a result of that, the only wide receiver that was worth a fuck was Drake London at 109 targets. The rest of the guys, no one had more than 30 targets. Mac Hollins was the second best target getter in that wide receiving core with 30, and he only played 9 games. So we're looking at a bunch of guys who, Van Jefferson, an Arthur Smith favorite, 28 targets in 10 games. So it was a patchwork thing, but they leaned on the tight end. And I think that if the Steelers are to do that, then probably it's going to be DK Metcalf, Pat Friermuth, and Jonnu Smith as your 3 leading target getters. But I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to have a big say in that, because we saw recently, as a news point, that he and Arthur Smith are trying to come to a meeting of the minds on how they're going to run that offense. And I bet you if there was a reason outside of personal matters as to why maybe Aaron Rodgers waited so long to sign, which I think it was mostly personal, but if we're going to speculate something different, it would be that he and Arthur Smith were probably negotiating. There's probably some negotiation in place about how much say Rodgers would have over the offense with Arthur in the mix. And I bet that there was quite a bit of conversation about that if we were going to go that direction.
So the TLDR version of that is fuck Calvin Austin and Robert Woods and Roman Wilson. Also, though, I just want to chime in. Like on the Aaron Rodgers thing, I have no doubt there were conversations about what the offense would look like. I have equally no doubts that the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers knew that Aaron Rodgers would be a Steeler in March.
Yeah.
And certainly by the draft. And if you listened and read between the lines the comments of the owner, Art too, or Mike Tomlin at the time, and the things that were being said by them, how, Aaron Rodgers won't impact our draft strategy. Really? If you don't really have a quarterback, you're not going to think about drafting a quarterback? So I felt like that was all baked into the cake. And I do agree. I mean, you want your coordinator and your four-time NFL MVP quarterback to be, on the same page. And probably when you sign Aaron Rodgers, I think that's the negotiation in and of itself. You're acknowledging, Aaron Rodgers is going to have some say here. And maybe they just had to, get Arthur Smith, get them on the same page. But I think the landing spot to me was a foregone conclusion. Even, the reporting from insiders when George Pickens was traded was that Aaron Rodgers was fully consulted and knew what was going on. So I feel like this was more of a just like, hey, as soon as Rodgers shows up, the circus comes with him. Let's just delay the circus until we have to, right? Kind of situation. And also, I think there were personal matters that were keeping him aside. And the Jets saw last year, he took off a mandatory minicamp. That became a huge story, even though it was kind of pre-baked into the cake. Everyone knew it was going to happen. It's just anything that goes on with Aaron Rodgers is going to draw incredible scrutiny from a media that mostly dislikes him. So I think that's probably part of this, is just to minimize that exposure. But either way, we've got Aaron Rodgers now with another tight end, Jonnu Smith, my Scott Friermuth share from the Scott Fish Bowl. Not as exciting as it was yesterday, but not ruined. And Calvin Austin and Robert Woods condemned to the ash heap of fantasy football society.
I'm not so sure about that yet, but I would say it's definitely
redraft.
I would say redraft that they get bumped down for sure. But I still might take a late chance on Calvin Austin as he falls.
That will surprise zero listeners of this podcast over the course of time.
That's right. I still believe. But we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Big story, big developing news. Hopefully there will be not a lot of developing news. We're supposed to be in the quiet time. This is only when in case of emergency kind of situations. But we kind of knew there was foreshadowing that, the teams have been talking about this. Jonnu Smith wanted more money. A lot of chatter in the footballguys.com site between staffers about how, what this means for the Miami Dolphins. Let me just throw this out. I mean, we've heard a lot of talk this year that Mike McDaniels needs a culture shift, that everything needs to change coming off a bad year. And the fact that they weren't interested in paying a guy who was about to become a free agent eventually and was going to want to be paid pretty much accordingly. Does this tell you anything about where they stand as a team and an organization?
I do think that it doesn't look great from that standpoint, that you would get rid of a guy like that. And on the surface, when you're looking at the tight end room, you don't have anybody that you feel is really proven to replace
Julian Hill.
Smith's numbers. Yeah, Julian Hill would be the likely candidate. Pharaoh Brown is certainly a nice journeyman reserve who can contribute. But you're probably looking, a good year for Pharaoh Brown's probably 30 catches.
Maybe Andrews.
40. Mark Andrews. What about Mark Andrews?
I mean, like, if we're just throwing out, if teams
you're
are going to
just
start
wish
trading,
casting. You're just wish
teams
casting.
are going to start trading around. I mean, there's a list of names that I could throw out: David Njoku, Cole Kmet, Michael Mayer, Kyle Pitts, Tyler Higbee.
All of that's fine, but here's the other thing: maybe you just decide that, and from what I've been reading, that maybe you just decide that we don't really need a tight end to be a weapon here in this offense to the level that people are saying. And we can get enough from Hill or a combination of our reserves, and we'll just go to the hole more with our third wide receiver or even a fourth wide receiver. And that third wide receiver, is that going to be Nick Akine Westbrook, or Westbrook Akine, excuse me, or is it going to be Malik Washington? And Malik Washington is certainly a guy that I would keep an eye on. So this could be a benefit for that third receiver in the room to be a major player in fantasy. And when I say major, meaning low-end starter, which is, so I'm thinking somewhere between 700, 800 yards and maybe 4 to 5 touchdowns. Maybe that's something that Malik Washington ends up getting an opportunity to fulfill, or it could be Westbrook-Akine. So those are two guys I'd keep an eye out for if they don't trade through Bob's wish casting for Miami.
We'll see what they do. I mean, the offense kind of ran through the tight end last year, right? It was Jonnu Smith was the leading piece, the guy that created the mismatches, and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, for our purposes, vied for best supporting actor role.
And that's why they were so bad last year, because they let through Jonnu Smith. So, and they didn't have a quarterback who could, who could hit Hill and Waddle on a consistent basis for much of the season. So, yeah.
All right, Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mika Fitzpatrick back to Miami where he got his start, and we'll see if the Dolphins make other moves at tight end among the many possibly available players out there that we have just thrown out willy-nilly for no reason other than to get you excited and nervous about your already invested shares. You're welcome. All right, let's move on, Matt, to the rest of the agenda. Bucky Irving, 8 rushing TDs, all in the red zone last year. How much is Irving? How much of it was scheme and defensive expectations? And are we drafting him too high this year? Feel all those or fuck them?
I feel like we're drafting him a little too high.
I do too.
Yeah, I think it's not just this red zone. It's a number of layers of things. And this is one layer of it, because when you watch the film last year, there were a lot of red zone plays that were set up to look like passing alignments where he got the ball. And the defense was playing pass pretty heavily. And he did a great job with the ball and scored, and credit to him for that. And he is a good NFL running back. No doubt about it. He's a starting caliber NFL running back to an extent. But I think that to say that he's a red zone monster, I would say that the scheme deserves enough credit that it might mitigate you being that strong with the phrasing. And then you still have Sean Tucker, who's their third back, who might wind up being their second back before it's all said and done. And he's fast enough and big enough that if Bucky Irving doesn't follow up with as strong of a season, Sean Tucker might be the guy going into camp this time next year, and everybody goes, well, can Bucky Irving reclaim his rookie glory? We've seen this type of thing happen. So I would say Irving's a little overpriced, but if you're going to pay for somebody, he's probably the one you're going to do. And then I would say Tucker's the one that's the most underpriced that you can get at the best value.
That seems reasonable. I like Tucker's the guy that I've been drafting and taking late round flyers on this draft. I'm not forgetting that there is a Rashad White in existence. I just don't know what the role is going to be. But I do think I totally agree. I think we're overpaying for Bucky Irving right now, and I'm fine letting someone else do that as I wait a little later and get Kyron Williams of the world will suit me just fine. All right, Dyami Brown is the slam dunk wide receiver 3 in the Jags lineup. Feel it or fuck it?
Fuck it. Not believing that. He may be the slam dunk wide receiver 3, but he's not the slam dunk 4th option. He may not even be the slam dunk 5th option, because when you count it all up, Travis Etienne is certainly going to be a high priority receiver in this offense. And if he isn't, that means that LaQuint Allen is really playing well. Because they're going to use him a fair bit, apparently, in the slot.
Very good at that.
Then there's this Parker Washington dude we keep talking about, or I keep talking about, who will probably get some situational touches because he has a good rapport with Trevor Lawrence. And let's remember Brenton Strange. He's a part of this mix. He's probably going to be the 3rd most targeted option in this offense. And so you've got that in the mix. If you ask me, I think that, really, Dyami Brown is probably vying for a split of targets with Parker Washington as like the 5th guy in this offense. And if the 5th guy in this offense is getting starter level value, then Trevor Etienne is a top 3 quarterback in this draft this year.
Trevor
and a
Lawrence.
Massive bargain. Trevor Lawrence. Did I say Trevor Etienne?
You
I did, didn't I? Yeah, Trevor Lawrence.
There are no marriages here that we've been told about. So I think, and that's fine. So I think this is interesting because like the reputation for Brown is like, so I think we could bifurcate this. If it was the May and June Brown, feel it all day long. Guy is a monster in shorts and shoulder pads. Get into the season, he's not so monstrous. So I'm gonna side with you on this one and say fuck it. But I am watching it. I am getting late round shares, flyer shares of Brown when I feel like it's appropriate, or I'm stacking players and I want to take a shot. There's another one I haven't been in New York, Jalin Hyatt. Can he deliver fantasy starter value with Russell Wilson, who seems to have taken a shine to him? And also, among adding him to the list of players, Jalin Hyatt, who have bulked up noticeably. He's joining Trey Tucker, Marvin Harrison Jr., and others in that regard.
Yeah.
And Jaden Daniels, by the way.
Jaden Daniels. See, there you go. I think that we could see Jalin Hyatt be a nice late round value who can get you somewhere between, 600 to 800 yards if it all really works out well for him. But I think that's going to require an injury, because I don't think you're going to see Wan'Dale Robinson lose his role to Jalin Hyatt. He's just basically the check down option. Now, maybe he won't get checked down to as often because he has a quarterback, unlike Daniel Jones, who is a bombs away kind of character. So maybe instead of having 140 targets and 90 catches, an 800 yards, something like that for Wan'Dale, maybe you split that in half, and now you see 70 targets going Hyatt's way, and that could and then Hyatt could probably be somewhere in the range of 35 to 45 catches and give you, 15, 16 yards a catch and give you a few touchdowns. That's probably that's a nice upside look for Hyatt, but you're still probably looking at someone who's a boom bust big play fantasy option who helps you win a week when he plays well, but you better have a lot of really good players surrounding him to have him in your lineup on a regular basis.
Yeah, I like the previous version of him named Isaiah Hodgins. It seems like there's a guy there's an outlier in this offense. It seems like they can have some big games. I mostly say fuck it to anybody not named Malik Neighbors in this receiving core, although Wan'Dale Robinson does seem to draw his share of targets. I know the quarterback dynamic changes all this, but I'm not, here's the thing about offenses, Matt. For me, in fantasy, bad offenses skim the surface. Good offenses drill down deep. This is not yet a good offense. Put him on my waiver wire watch list. Feel that. Drafting him, fuck it.
Yeah, I get that, because, Darius Slayton's probably going to get his 600 to 700 yards, which all of this is just vanilla. That's basically what we're talking about with all that. Yeah, Malik Neighbors maybe bordering on 1,500 yards, and Wan'Dale. Yeah, I could see cutting Wan'Dale in half and Russell Wilson going, check down receivers. We don't need no stinking check down receivers in this offense. And he moonballs a lot to Hyatt and to Neighbors. And he already said the reason I wanted to go to the Giants was to play with Malik Neighbors. That was pretty much flat out. And I think anybody would say that if they had, if they were a quarterback with half a brain. So there you go.
Let's circle back around to the Jaguars and your fascination with all things Etienne. How about this? Etienne remains the running back one in Jacksonville this year. Feel it or fuck it.
I'm feeling it, even though I think that from a rushing yardage standpoint, it's very possible that either Tank Bigsby, Bashul Tutin probably ends up being the guy that you want to own and have their rights to down the stretch as the runner. But I think that really it's going to be about the combined rushing receiving that Etienne could probably give you. And I think that that's where I'm probably going to be upping things, is bumping his reception total a little bit more and taking some away from the third receiver, whether that's Brown or Washington, whatever those guys are. And I think that that's where Etienne's going to have the most value.
I think that's fair. Like, I think we've talked about this before. Everyone's in the same price range. There's that knot of players that I'm like, whatever one I end up with, Etienne or Javonte Williams in Dallas, Bashal Tutin or Jaden Blue in Dallas or in Jacksonville and Dallas respectively. I mean, like, at that point, I'm not drafting my starters. I'm drafting guys in case something good happens for them. And I think something good happening for Etienne is absolutely in the range of possible outcomes there.
I mean, last thing I'll say about it is this: is Liam Combs pretty much said to reporters, "Look, I haven't seen anything about him that makes me think he deserves the criticism that people have levied towards him. He looks great, but he looks good in his scheme, and I think that his scheme is probably more conducive to what Etienne does well."
I think that's a fair point. So George Kittle is giving out fantasy advice these days, or he's at least throwing out some player assessments. And he mentioned Isaiah Neyor, Nebraska wide receiver now with the 49ers. Should we pay attention to this shout out? Feel it or fuck it?
In Dynasty, you should not only be paying attention to it, but you should be adding him to your waiver wire on expanded rosters or taking a chance in him late in drafts, as I have been doing for weeks now. And I would say the reason being is that when you watch Neyor's tape, he's a guy we've talked about here. Played at Wyoming and just ripped it up there. So they brought him over to Texas, and Steve Sarkisian recruited him and brought him over there and was talking him up, and saying my 1-2 punch of Xavier Worthy and Isaiah Neyor are going to be a fantastic asset to this offense. And Neyor tore his ACL. And then next thing you know, he winds up 2 years later in Nebraska, where he's getting back on his feet and playing well. But this is a 6'4", 218-pound guy who runs a low 4.4s, high 4.3s. Yeah, Bob's getting excited, and he can track the ball well. And I think he's very good after the catch. It's just that he's always running away from people, so I never got to see him really weaving through traffic and seeing his vision. But if I were to, I think I even mentioned in the RSP, he would have been a top 12 receiver easily if I had gotten a chance to really see him do anything other than show his back to defenders on a regular basis because of where he was targeted. But I think this is someone who could wind up being the surprise of the 49ers receiving core within a year or two, because I think he's better than Jordan Watkins. I think he's better than a bigger play threat than Jacob Cowing. I think he runs routes well enough that he can be a man-to-man threat in the way that Jawan Jennings is only hoping that he can become, and maybe he'll prove that he can. But I think with that, and Brandon Ayuk being a guy that everybody feels like needs to be pushed a little bit to be as good as he is, he could be the replacement to Brandon Ayuk with Ricky Pearsall playing the flanker role. So I'd keep an eye on him. Obviously, with Kittle, Kittle being a player analysis, I always joke around when you watch the NFL 100 is he's big, he's fast, he's strong. That's their analysis.
That's what it's supposed to be.
That's how they are. And that's what he's giving you right there. I'm not saying Kittle's a dumb guy by any stretch of the imagination. He's a very intelligent dude, but you see that kind of viewpoint. There's not much you're talking about technically with him, but his game is skilled enough technically to grow into being a starter in this league.
Fair enough. I'm not in position to say fuck that, Matt Waldman. You're wrong. In fact, I will probably be adding him to some of my rosters at this point. Dylan Sampson, the other running back we get here in the draft. Deuce Staley talking about saying he can play in the slot on third downs. Will that make him a fantasy asset in 2025 in this offense, which already has a guy that kind of does that in Jerome Ford?
Yeah, fuck that. It's not happening. It's like, when this is the time of the year where LaQuinton Allen's going to play more in the slot. We're going to see all these different people play more in the slot. And when you say a running back's going to play more in the slot, it doesn't mean this is going to be Larry Centers from back in the 1990s and early 2000s who's going to collect, well over 100 targets and catch the ball, and be a PPR star as a fullback. This is not that kind of thing. I think generally that means we see a role for him. That means that we want people to know that he could be pretty good, but we're probably not going to use him extensively in that way. He'll just be a part of the offense that rotates in and out. There's still this guy named Deontay Johnson who will probably be the slot receiver in
so he says.
Cleveland. So he says, if he doesn't if he doesn't fuck it all up like he did last year royally. And if he doesn't, they still have a guy in DeAndre Carter and David Bell, two guys there who are pretty darn good slot receivers, even if they're not massively targeted, who they would probably use more often than Dylan Sampson or Jerome Ford. So I think that Sampson, in a best case scenario, is if there's injuries, maybe you might see 20 or 30 catches out of him if there are injuries. Right now, I've got him projected for about 11 catches, 77 yards, and I'm not changing from that right now just because I heard Deuce Staley say we might use him in the slot, which means to me like probably once every other game, or he'll get targeted once every other game.
Recent history, at least his coaching career, Deuce Staley says a lot of things. Very motivational, trying to get players to jump through hoops and do things that he wants them to do. So, I'm not going to put bless me. I'm not going to put too much stock into that. I am putting a lot of stock in Marquez Valdes-Scantling as the X receiver in Seattle.
Did you put a lot of stock in Tycho too?
It hurt me to say that.
Okay.
Well, he hurt the Seahawks passing game MVS as their X receiver fielder.
It's funny because teams really seem to covet this guy as like their journeyman X stretch guy. Stretch the field, let everybody work underneath it. The thing is to enforce that, you need to have the guy catch the ball, I think. So, and what winning teams has he been a part of since he left the Packers? And were they winning team of renown when he was with the Packers as their guy stretching it? That's the problem.
I mean, he momentarily looked great as a Saint, not so much as a Bill. I mean, there were moments.
There were moments, yeah. Buy two, get one free. That's kind of his approach towards catches. Give me 2 targets, I'll get you 1 free. I'll catch one. So
headline for today's Field or Fuck It: Matt Waldman hates Marquez Valdes-Scantling.
I was just disappointed in him because I liked him coming out of school. No, but seriously, he'll give you probably 60 targets, 30 catches, probably somewhere over 500 yards. So when he catches it, he's going to make it count. But I don't see him. Yeah, I think he's probably in a tight race for third in the pecking order with Noah Fant.
Waiver wire watch list, people. Keep it ready. Mason Taylor, the rookie in New York for the Jets, impressing as a blocker, and that solidifies his role as a startable fantasy asset this year. Feel it or fuck it.
I'm feeling that. I'm definitely feeling that. Bob Harris is scouting on NFL Network's Combine, I think, solidified for me that looking at that, we both saw the same things. Smooth pass receiver, good route runner. He's physical, and I always thought he was a good blocker. I mean, he was my number 2 tight end on the board, and I think that Justin Fields loves to throw it to the tight end. If there's a guy that he feels comfortable dumping a ball down to on a second read, he finds that tight end better than anybody. Look at Cole Kmet, who's on his way out of Chicago, this year.
Maybe to Miami.
There you go. With our luck, he'll wind up in New York, and all this Mason Taylor nonsense will be nonsense. But I think that Taylor can probably get somewhere between 65 to 75 targets, and that will be enough that he'll be a low-end tight end 1. And it just depends on what happens with the receiver situation. If we see that the receivers they're not going to add any different receivers to this mix, it's Garrett Wilson probably at 1,050 to 1,100 yards, and then you're looking at Taylor probably somewhere between 600 to 700 yards.
Seems reasonable. I do have an eye on Taylor. I'm drafting him very, very late. He's going very late. You don't have to invest anything in him. Certainly in Dynasty, he's obviously a high-end asset there for the potential he has in the future. But I think, like Matt, feeling he might be a little more it's the path to workload, right? Like, all due respect, Mr. Jeremy Ruckert, you have not shown me a lot so far in your career.
He's a blocker.
Right. There's not a lot in the way right now. Although Stone Smart is
smart.
He's smart.
But his hands, are they stones? I don't know. Probably
not. Zay Jones, very athletic. He's impressing everybody in Arizona. Apparently he's in store for a fantasy rebound as Arizona's likely wide receiver 3.
I'm feeling that he'll be the likely wide receiver 3 above Greg Dortch. But that may equate to.
I see what you did there, above George, a little feeling that.
Yeah, see, there you go. I didn't even. Hey, it's not happy accidents, but yeah, I think he's probably more a 300, 400 yard player. I don't see him as a fantasy asset, and that's because of the weekly punching bag on this show, Kyler Murray.
Oh, stop.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just not. I don't feel it. I think Kyler Murray is going to throw for just under 4,000 yards this year, probably around 38 to 3,900, and give you about 20 scores, and he'll rush for probably 500 to 700 yards and give you 5 to 7 scores. That'll make him fantasy worthy. But yeah, until he proves he can support more than one fantasy wide receiver or fantasy asset in the passing game, I ain't believing it.
Like, I don't even know that I'm interested in the wide receiver 3 in Cincinnati, a pass-heavy team that's going to be going off the charts throwing the football. I don't, Arizona's going to be run-heavy. I'm probably not interested in wide receiver 2 there, if I'm being honest, right?
Right.
So yeah, from a fantasy perspective, like Dynasty, from a redraft perspective, Dynasty, all bets are off the table. I have many players that I would never imagine anybody having, and I enjoy having them, and Zay Jones might be one of them. But in redraft, no, I'm with you there. Dallas Goedert, though, a lot of buzz about how he appreciates what Kevin Patullo, the new offensive coordinator, is doing, and that it might make him a better fantasy asset. I would say, I think it's easy to overlook. Availability has been a big issue for Dallas Goedert. When he's available, he does pretty well. My concerns are going to be the obvious ones, Matt. The diminished passing attempts there, 100 fewer attempts last year for Jalen Hurts than there were the year before. The reason is obvious. It's Saquon Barkley. How do we feel about Dallas Goedert? I feel like he's a super value where he's going well outside the tight end 1 range, well deep into the tight end 2s. I think he's overlooked. He's very productive when he's been on the field, but can he get enough going for us to be a consistent producer in fantasy football? Feel it or fuck it?
Yeah, I'd say fuck it, but I'm feeling the idea of taking him as a tight end too, as long as you're following up with a promising young player who's going to get likely opportunity to start. But and that's where I'm kind of at with this, is because it's the availability. I haven't projected for 12 games. Well, in 12 games, he's going to get probably close to 6 targets a game, probably catch over 4 of them, and probably give you almost 12 yards per catch. So you're looking at nearly 600 yards of offense and a couple of scores, which is great for 12 games. But he's only going to play those 12 probably. He's going to miss time. And also, like you said, it's a running offense. Now there's a lot of talk, it sounds like, where the offense wants to, that at least according to beat reporters, players are talking about that they feel like Saquon Barkley should get fewer touches. Now, is that from a selfish standpoint with their incentive-laden contracts and they're privately saying this? Or is this a real plan where they feel like that they don't want to lean so much on one player and stay sharp with what they're doing? I mean, they won the whole thing last year. What's the problem with the plan that they had? So it's going to be fascinating to see where that goes. But I just think that it's going to be a balanced offense with at least more run than a lot of teams have. So that means that Goedert probably is going to get the ball more efficiently and get it easily, and maybe that ramps up his touchdown factor. But and maybe that's where that can be balanced. But yes, as a tight end 2, he's just on the border. Like, he has the way I see the numbers going, if he can play the whole season, you're looking at a starter. So that's a worthwhile investment. I just don't know if I would not take him as my only tight end as a tight end 2 and go, I found my tight end 1, right, and go from there, unless you just know your league and you know that there's guys that are going to be on the waiver wire that you go, I can grab that or I can trade for it.
I think that's a reasonable approach there. I will have shares of him as my tight end 2. I will not be having him as my tight end 1 if I wait late to draft my first tight end. There are probably some other targets that I think are going in the same range. Like, I might rather have Zach Ertz if I'm just drafting a tight end that I hope to be tight end 1 late. I might like Zach Ertz better. But they're going in kind of the same range. So you can pick your poison, kids, and have a good time doing it.
I agree.
All right, then. So while we're in Philadelphia, let's stick with the Yiggles for a brief moment. We're lower on Saquon Barkley due to last year's volume. I think that's an easy feel it for me, or is it a fuck it for you?
No, I'm feeling it as well. I think that they're going to drop the volume down. They added more players to the depth chart that I think can be meaningful contributors. And I think they probably did, realistically, in the NFL, they probably did realistically get some complaints from the receiving core about, hey, can we get the ball more? Can we make more of an impact? We could, there might be a little bit of
They
that.
won the
in
Super
mix.
Bowl. How much of that can they do?
I know, but I bet there's some private things
Well,
going on.
I
And they did
guarantee
change
private
and they
conversations.
did change offensive coordinators. They do have a new offensive
Not by
coordinator.
choice.
I know, but they're going to try and put their stamp on things a little bit. That's how they do. I mean, we've seen it with dynasties where the new coach comes in and they try and put their stamp on stuff, and everybody's like,
isn't this still, though, more of a Nick Sirianni offense than anything else? I mean, Kellen Moore brought aspects, but I mean, in the end, is Nick Sirianni not an offensive guy? And
I would hope so, but we also had a Brian Billick. Brian Billick was an offensive guy with the Minnesota Vikings, and he went to the Ravens, and they couldn't find shit for offense.
Well, they had Trent Dilfer as their quarterback.
Yeah, well, there you go. But and
still won a Super Bowl.
There are a lot of guys like that who've come over their offensive minds, and their offense can't do shit because they're not the ones running the show with it. And so I think that's we've seen that Sirianni's proven that he can delegate well with a reasonable coach. His coach should probably be decent enough. I just don't know. I mean, I look at it and say, Barkley's still going to be a guy that if you draft him as a running back one, I'm not going to argue with you. And I'm not going to argue with you if you say, fuck that. I'm going to take him as my top running back and let all you naysayers, twist in the wind. And I would say, good for you. I'm good with that too, because I'm still looking at, probably 1,800 yards worth of offense and 15 touchdowns, and that's good enough to be a top 5 running back in many years.
Right, unless you're one of those people out there who believe in curses. I'm looking at you, Michael Fabiano. That think those are real things, that he's had 370 touches, he's going to break something. I don't believe those things. I do believe that heavy usage, though, over the course of time, the trend is they don't get as heavy usage. Also, easy to say, I don't like paying the historic premium that comes with historic seasons. I'm not interested in paying it on Brock Bowers this year. I'd rather wait a little later and get Trey McBride, or wait even a little later and get George Kittle. But I think he'll put up great numbers. Maybe not Brock Bauer numbers, but I'm also not paying that middle of the second round premium. And part of this depends on where you're drafting, right? If you're in the first half of the draft and someone's taken Jamar Chase and Bijan Robinson, and maybe you're facing a decision between Jahmyr Gibbs and Barkley, or maybe you like another receiver in that mix, Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, whoever. I mean, I wouldn't fault anyone for making any decision they make. You're at the top end. Conversely, if I'm in the second half of the first round and everyone's scared off by the curses and whatnot, I'll take Barkley all day if it's at the right point. So I just think we can overplay these, the historic trends a little bit too much, and we tend to overpay for them. And sometimes some people will overestimate the negative impact too. So be objective, look where you're drafting, and take the route you like. I still think the Philadelphia Eagles have a very good offensive line. I still think this offense will center on and focus on Saquon Barkley. So don't get scared. AJ Dillon is on the Philadelphia Eagles roster. Are we sleeping on him as a viable backup? Feel it or fuck it?
I think we are. Everyone's talking about Will Shipley because of the draft capital last year and the fact that he's entering year 2 and didn't have as great of a season, and they think that Barkley's going to get less volume, so the first guy on the list for them is Will Shipley. And Shipley certainly can catch the ball well. He's quick. He has some good skills at being able to work through tight creases. I think he's a decent runner. But at the same time, I think that A.J. Dillon, they're looking at it from the opposite. Oh, he got ran out of Green Bay, and we haven't seen him produce in a while. He had a neck injury. He apparently had a stellar camp before the neck injury, and I think that he probably would have seen more touches as the running back 2 behind Josh Jacobs, and may have taken some of the load off Josh Jacobs with his skill set. People always see him as a plotter, but I see him, they see Ramondre Stevenson in the same way. I think he's very much like a Ramondre Stevenson type of back. And we could see scenarios where if the Eagles take early leads, Dillon could wind up being the one who gets the majority of the touches in closeout time, or gets a red zone specialist role. Well, that won't matter with the tush push, but I could see where if Barkley gets hurt, it's going to be a split between Shipley and Dillon, and I could see where Dillon gets as much, if not a little bit more, than Shipley as the runner. So you're going to want to keep an eye on him, and if he gets hurt again, I would keep an eye on Montrell Johnson, the rookie out of Florida, who's a good straight line runner with speed, who behind this offensive line could give you Isaiah Guerendo type of production when Guerendo was hot last year.
Are we sleeping on him? If we're going with the royal we, as in me, yes, I'm 100% sleeping on him. I have way too many shares of Will Shipley at the moment. I suddenly feel, well, I've been drafting very late in drafts as like a flyer on the off chance something goes on with Barkley. So, but yes, I think in general people are sleeping on AJ Dillon. I think a lot of people are just like waking back up into the football mode from their off-season hibernation. Didn't even catch that AJ Dillon is in Philadelphia or whatnot. So yeah, we're sleeping on him, and it's maybe something to be a little more mindful of. JJ McCarthy, the Minnesota Vikings second-year quarterback, will be the starter this year. Is he a top 12 fantasy quarterback? Matt, feel it or fuck it?
I'm starting to feel it, mainly because after digging into Sam Darnold's numbers and seeing how well he performed, but also seeing where maybe some of his weaknesses could be, I think that McCarthy can probably give you 4,000 to 4,100 yards and close to 30 touchdowns. And especially as long as Addison, Jefferson, and Hawkinson are healthy and they've got a running game between either Jones or Mason, there's just too many guys here who can make things life easy. And the offensive line is emerging. This is a unit that's getting forecasted as a top 10, top 12 unit and is on the rise. And I think if you saw how well they handled the blitz last year and what that spelled for Sam Darnold handling the blitz well last year, I think that it's going to spell well for McCarthy. So McCarthy may not be, you may look at him and there may be quarterback analysts who look at him this year and nitpick some things about what he could do better as a first-year starter, but I think he's going to produce well and the bottom line is going to work out.
I mean, I feel like top 12 might be a little bit reachy. That said, I'm not here to doubt Kevin O'Connell's offense, right, and his ability to get the most out of the position. We have seen it over the course of time in Minnesota now, and I have a little faith in him and the just the overall operation in Minnesota, thinking that it's possible they got this draft pick right, and that they have the right coach to run the offense that'll suit him. So I think it is entirely in the range of possible outcomes, and also I think you're starting to see that reflected in his current draft position, which seems to be rising a little bit. Patrick Mahomes. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think interceptions-wise, Darnold was very good, and it was basically told to I think when you look at his stats, I could imagine O'Connell saying, listen, I don't care what happens, just take the sack. Don't throw it. Don't be stupid like you were in the past with throwing the football. And he was fantastic but he had against the blitz, I think he had 12 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, but he also had a sack rate that bordered on Caleb Williams, in some of these situations. And they had a much better O-line. So McCarthy, I think McCarthy's going to play a little more hero ball. I wouldn't be surprised if for every 2 touchdown passes he throws an interception.
As long as you're not in a scoring system where that costs you, okay.
Yeah.
I'll be all right with that.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes, is his demise becoming exaggerated, Matt? Feel it or fuck it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's the hip thing to do is to look at the past production and to say, is it not working out for him? Is he starting to decline in his play? Says Ben Roethlisberger, who then his trainer Bobby Stroup said, well, some quarterbacks actually continued working out on a regular basis past age 25. Basically, I think he was saying something, if he were on this show and uncensored, he probably would have said, Ben, stop eating and put down the Primantis and get rid of the tire that you got around you, and you would probably have been better too, and stop acting like an asshole about my guy. But I think that there's a lot of reasons that go into Patrick Mahomes not performing as well bottom line wise. And I think a lot of them are legitimate reasons. The offensive line has had issues, the way they played cover 3 against that scheme, and it took time for it to adjust. The fact that the Chiefs, for a few years before Rashee Rice, couldn't find a receiver that they drafted or picked. When they started with Mecole Hardman, and then they went through a bunch of them. Demarcus Robinson, they went through, they still had Chris Conley back and forth through there, Sky Moore, a bunch of dudes, Justin Ross, a lot of guys that you look at and go, haven't worked out. They haven't been able to figure out the offense. Marquise Brown couldn't stay healthy. They brought Juju Smith-Schuster in, couldn't stay healthy. A lot of stuff like this happening. And I think those things contribute to the overall performance of the player. And that's why we often see players who get kind of pushed out of a team after being all pros or MVPs for a while, and they go, well, they just don't look the same, and then they wind up somewhere else, and it's a good team around them, and they show they have plenty left. And I don't think the Chiefs are in that direction, but I think that it's easy clicks in June to be able to say, here's some stats that show that he's not playing as well, and some people making conclusions that aren't really well-rounded.
That seems reasonable. I felt like, I feel like he's been kind of locked in on the tier of his own in the middle of the first round, or in the middle of the quarterback one. So I think that's perfectly reasonable. He is Patrick Mahomes. Over times, they have shifted the way this offense operates. I think a lot of people expect them to go back to a pass-heavier attack now because we didn't see a great Isaiah Pacheco to end last year. That might change. He might be great again this year. Maybe they focus on the run and hit the deep balls, but they do have a receiving core that seems to be a little bit more robust than what we've seen the last couple of years. So, but either way, all that aside, I am not here to proclaim Patrick Mahomes' demise. They can too high safety him. They can create whole new defenses to slow him down, but I don't think you're going to stop him. As last year's Super Bowl appearance suggested, he will be in the running most every year, and probably for your fantasy team, he'll be perfectly serviceable. So with that, Matt, I think we're done feeling and fucking things today. I think I will move on to other endeavors. You will be working on your rankings and projections. Tell everyone how to get them.
Yeah, you can go to mattwaldman.com, and you can order the rookie scouting portfolio. That's the pre-draft, post-draft guide. You can also order the dynasty rankings and projections. The June update is what you'll get, but then there'll be an update in early August, and you'll probably get at least one more update in August, as well as once a month during the season. And of course, I'm at Football Guys as well. I'll be fucking with those rankings and getting those things, adjusted with this whole Jonnu Smith fiasco in Pittsburgh. And we'll see what that shakes out for Friermuth and the bunch.
And also a little bit of a fiasco for Miami, trying to figure out what's going to go on there.
Malik Washington, that's my new Calvin Austin.
I'm not surprised. Surprised. Everyone should expect that. All right, everybody, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. That's it for this week's edition of Feel It or Bucket.
Love you, Bob. Bye.
Love you. Bye.